Let's go ahead and get started. I would like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen to order for Wednesday, February 5th. Thank you all for coming. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the only thing on our agenda tonight is our continued budget review. This will be our last budget review session, and we'll have a vote on the budget hopefully at the end of this meeting if we're all agreed that everything is in order. So Jennifer, take it away.
All right, we have police up first. They're our only big department tonight. They're operating overall, they're up about $615,000, which is 6.46%. Administration is up 3.87%, which is really just normal salary increases is the bulk of that. The Investigation and Identification Division, which is the Detective Bureau, is up $27,000, which is just over 3%. Again, that's mostly driven by just regular salary increases. The first one that has some significant changes is Patrol. It's up just under $400,000. And a couple things going on there. In full-time salaries, they have the patrol officer that was funded in fiscal 25 for half a year, but now in fiscal 26 it's for a full year. So that's about $35,000 difference. In patrol full-time salary, this is the only department where we do take a little bit of a cut for attrition. They're the only department that's large enough and experiences enough turnover that we know there's going to be vacancies in a year. So for the last couple of years, we've done a reduction of $25,000 for attrition and doing the same thing in 26. Other than that, they have a lot of people getting step increases. So overall, their salaries are up about 6.5%.
Right now, you all are at 52 authorized uniform personnel. Is that
As of January 1st, it was 50.
As of January
53.
50, sorry, it's 53. And your current staffing is?
50.
50.
Is it 50?
Yeah.
Another big number here is their overtime, and it's up just under $90,000, which is about 14%. However, that is consistent with what they spent in fiscal 23 and fiscal 24. In OpenGov, they have a very nice analysis of their overtime. They spend a lot of time looking at historical trends, projecting for any future needs. So I'm very comfortable with that number. They really have it well justified. Records is up just under 3%. The only thing they have going on here is there was a reclassification of one of their clerical positions in the middle of fiscal 25, so their salaries are up a bit more than what they normally would be, but that's really the only significant change. In professional standards, they are up just under $22,000, which is 9%, and a good part of that is they're assuming that they'll be filling 3 positions and that they will be going to the academy, and the tuition for those 3 is $12,500. And then they also have some state required AED and CPR training that's driving that up. Crossing guards have been very stable at the $66,000 budget. In communications, it shows a decrease, but what's really going on here is salaries are stable because we don't have a contract with the dispatchers yet, so there's no increase here. That increase is budgeted in the employee salary set aside. But we've moved a good amount of telecommunications into more appropriate divisions. We moved a couple things into administration and a couple things, I think, into station operations just because of the nature of those bills. They were telecommunications bills, but not for the communications division. We want to make sure that that's just dispatch related expenses.
Hey Jen, going back to the crossing guards, no inflation on that? Just no raises?
Not that I'm aware of.
No, and it's based on the number of shifts, and so the budget is more, although the budget year over year is pretty stable, it is more than we spent in fiscal 24, which was only $61,000. We're budgeting $66,000.
Okay.
Fleet services, there's a slight decrease, and that's mostly because we had a retirement and We filled it at lower than what the previous person was. Station operations, this is another one where their full-time salaries are impacted because of what happened in the current year. This is where they have the new facility coordinator that was approved mid-year fiscal 25 through a special appropriation, and that salary is $100,000. So out of the $130,000 increase in station operations, 100 of that is the facilities coordinator position. And then animal control, same as fleet services, there was a retirement, and the new hire is at a lower salary, so there's a slight decrease in that account. On the revenue side, very minimal increase of $1,600. They don't have all that many revenues.
Can I ask a question there?
Yeah.
Dog fines, what is that? The $1,000?
I believe those are the fees for unlicensed dogs.
So if you stop somebody and they're not licensed?
There are fines associated to that.
Okay.
Okay, that's it for operating. On capital, they have a few requests. They have the usual requests for vehicles. This year, they are requesting 2 patrol vehicles, 1 fleet and facility vehicle, and 1 admin vehicle. For patrol vehicles, they use a 2-year replacement cycle, and as you guys are well aware, we get the hand-me-downs if Brian thinks that they are worth keeping around, and we will bump out our older vehicles and
Jen,
use
I
new
believe
ones.
that's a 3-year.
Is that what I said?
You said
2
2.
Oh,
I think it's
I think I was looking at the word too, because you said you moved from 2-year. Yeah, it's a 3-year cycle, sorry. Thank you. And the town gets the hand-me-downs if they are in good enough condition. For the fleet facility vehicle, it's going to be replacing a 10-year-old Ford F-250, but they are going to be replacing it with an F-350.
Bless you.
This truck, one of its uses is towing the police boat. They got this truck before they got the boat, and the towing capacity on this truck is not enough for the boat. So the Ford F-350 will have sufficient towing capacity for the boat. So a little bit of an upgrade in the type of vehicle.
What about just your general patrol cars? When I went on my ride-along, one of the things they talked about was that certainly for the supervisors, having a Tahoe versus an Explorer was going to be better simply because of the capacity for equipment and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Where's that trending, or what do you guys want to do?
We're looking into that, and what I did propose in the admin vehicle replacement that we do a Tahoe. That would be
You replace an Explorer with a Tahoe? Or
correct. That would be the chief's replacement. So almost like a trial run type thing. Chief has experience in a lot of our patrol vehicles, given the amount of time he's been on, larger stature and everything. And the biggest takeaway, I think, from the Tahoes is the cargo space as well as the passenger compartment space. We house a lot of equipment in there, and I think you could attest to that with your ride along with Sergeant.
Well, no,
Jimenez.
Sergeant Jimenez, he showed me the back and
Yeah.
showed me all the equipment that he had to have, and there's literally no room back there
Right.
at all. So,
Yeah, and the trend is going towards the Tahoes in police work now.
Okay.
You can see neighboring towns have them. So there are a lot of communities going to that, but I think we're, like Captain Mastriani said, the chief wants to test it first before we decide to
Start
go in and
replacing
start
vehicles.
switching
Yeah.
everything,
Okay.
so.
All right. Thank you.
All right, so we just covered the admin vehicle, it's gonna be a Tahoe. They are requesting $9,000 for AED replacement, 3 AEDs being replaced, and this is necessary for them to have with them because they are first responders. $6,628 for patrol rifles. This is part of a multi-year program to equip all officers with a rifle. It'll be another item that they're carrying with them. $31,745 for reskinning of the police boat. It's a 2015 boat that was acquired in 2016. It's in the water 24/7, and the current skin is dating back to 2016. It's starting to deteriorate. So reskinning it now will allow us to keep using the boat and extend the useful life of that. And then $69,222 for the IT server room AC replacement. They currently have a 3-ton split air conditioning unit that's nearing the end of its useful life. It's critical for maintaining the temperature for the servers that manage data and communication systems, and so that now needs to be replaced before it starts to fail. And the final one is $14,582 for elevator pit repairs. At the bottom of the elevator pit, the water pump failed. There was water intrusion and damage to some of the key components of the elevator. The pump has been replaced, the water's been pumped out, but they need to finish the repairs for the elevator. Otherwise, it could become inoperable. And that is everything for police.
Have you all engaged in any discussions or been briefed on this proposed firearm training facility in Newtown that West Cog is discussing?
Yeah, I believe the survey was going around, and I did have discussions recently with the chief about that. It just doesn't seem practical for our department to join that, just because we do have an indoor range, and it is in fact also rifle rated, so we could train with our handgun and our rifle, and we do rifle training in the outside environment as well. At Worcester Mountain, we have a great working relationship with them, so I don't see the need for us to get involved with that.
It's still in the planning phase, but it's an astronomical amount of money on a
Correct.
per officer basis.
Yes.
And when we were defibrillated, we had a long debate about that. It has some tactical training that I don't think you have in your rifle range that these guys might have. One of the things we discussed at our meeting today as to whether there could be an a la carte menu. So in other words, if you wanted access to, say, some aspect of that facility that you don't have now, we could try to make that available, but we're working on that, so more to come. Questions for, go ahead, Sarah.
I was working with Jack Davis, and this year we came up with kind of a new policy as far as guiding the introduction of something, a new capital request kind of off-cycle. I was just wanting to make sure that everything that you can possibly think of is in this budget, to make sure that you have everything that you need. We've always been obviously very supportive. I don't think we've ever said no to anything. But so everything you think for the next year?
Yeah, everything on this 6-year and everything what I'm proposing for next fiscal year that's it.
Great.
There should not be any
Fantastic.
surprises.
Great.
Okay.
Fantastic.
As long as the building
exactly.
stays.
Yeah, the one comment I would
That
add
is
on
the
that
bigger, yes, that building
is when they get the facilities coordinator on board, that person having a lot more experience with
May come up with
buildings, they
something.
may
Yeah.
discover something
understood,
that
and
the
that
PD
building
didn't
is
even
definitely a
anticipate.
problem, yeah.
Has someone
Yeah.
been hired for that position?
We're currently in the hiring process,
Okay.
so we conducted
Ed
interviews
mentioned night,
last week, and now we're in the background phase.
Good.
So as long as everything goes well,
That's
I
great.
think in the coming weeks, we should have someone on board.
Yeah, and I don't want to discourage that person if they find something that we really should address from a capital standpoint in that building, particularly if it's
Yeah.
some kind of deferred maintenance that if we put in place, it could save us money
Yeah.
later on.
Yeah.
If we do that, then definitely
Absolutely.
bring that to our
Yeah.
attention.
Yeah.
right away.
It's important.
That's the only
The
thing that
building
might
has
change if
been
there's
so
something that's.
problematic, of course,
Something
yeah.
that's recognized that
Of
we need to
course.
repair.
Fingers crossed.
Yes.
Yes.
So I had one question on the reskinning of the boat. So I see reskinning once. How long, what's the lifespan for that boat?
We should get at least another 10 years out of that, just the reskin. The boat itself life, I mean, it could go as long as we're upkeep with the maintenance, I would say for another 20 years.
And is that, the $100,000, is that for that boat?
That's for engines.
That's for
Yeah,
something
so the
different?
engines are entirely different.
Okay. All right.
Can I build on that engine question, because it was one of the ones I had? Are they similar to what we do on police cars? So we don't judge a police car by the mileage, but rather how long the engine runs. So is it the same on the police boat?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more wear and tear, and as you know, in emergency services with a boat, it's in the water all year long, and it's used quite often. So yes, it'd be something similar to that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Marcy, Mike, any questions? Marcy?
Thank you.
Okay, we appreciate it. Short
Thank you.
discussion, but thank you.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you. Have a good night.
Next one is our other emergency services, which is just emergency management and emergency medical service. In emergency management, we touched on this when we talked about the fire marshal. They did request a part-time deputy emergency management director, but we are able to address that by dedicating 20% of a deputy fire marshal. So that was the only thing that they, position-wise, that was requested but not recommended. And then, so overall, they're up a little over $7,000, which is just under 3%. And this department also has, the assistant fire marshal is split 50-50 between the fire marshal's office and his emergency management duties. So his 50% of his salary is here. On emergency medical service, we're down $14,000, which is just over 8%. And that is because in professional services, I'm projecting a decrease. This is where the town has to make up the difference between our paramedic contract and what is collected for paramedic services. The last couple of years, 22 and 23, was a little over $100,000. Last year it was only $81,000. So I did bring it down. We had a budget of 105 this year. I brought it down to 87, but this is one to watch. For the first 2 quarters of this year, we've actually had to pay only less $1,800 because the call volume has been up significantly. But I'm certainly not comfortable cutting this way back just because the history is a lot closer to 100,000. But if this does become a trend, then we may be collecting more and making up more of that contract. But I wouldn't feel comfortable doing anything at this point. And then for capital, neither one has anything requested in 26. They just have a couple of items out in the out years. The big one that we've had on the radar is radio replacement for end-of-life equipment through emergency management, but that seems to keep getting pushed. It hasn't come to fruition yet, but it will, and that's over $1 million. And then EMS just has some vehicle. We really do, just vehicles are the big defibrillator for them. But that is the end of our departments. So what I wanted to do was just give you a look at where we stand. Couple things that we've talked about throughout regarding proposed changes to the general fund. We talked about the investment income increasing $1 million, the change for the library because of the medical renewal, the change for the registrars because of the tabulator, the higher speed tabulator, $11,000 increase in the fuel budget because of a miscalculation, and then the $5,000 reduction for medical insurance. In our other funds, I've made a similar reduction for the sewer operating fund and the parking operating fund based on the medical insurance renewal. We have the request to increase the Norotan Heights Fire Department by $500,000. And then these were 2 that there was some discussion on. The first one, there was a lot of discussion about the live-in facility study that Norotan Heights had proposed. Based on the discussion that was here and thinking of expanding it to include all of the departments, looking at some alternatives besides just building a facility, you know, can we buy something, can we subsidize rent, what else could we do, and making it a broader study. I think it might make sense to defer that so that we can get a better scope on it, get the commission involved, and make sure that it's looking at all of the departments. And it's also something, if we hire the fire administrator position, they would have a big role in coordinating this. So I was thinking it might make sense to push that off. And then the other one that we talked about was the Cherry Lawn dredging and maybe pulling that back into fiscal 26. A question was raised if there were any economies of scale by doing both ponds, and Jen Fava did speak with the contractor who gave the price estimates. He did say they're really 2 separate projects, but through negotiations, there might be a little bit that could be saved on the price, but nothing significant. However, on the flip side, delaying it doing one this year, one next year, there could be some potential for cost escalation on the second one that's put out a year. So probably not a big swing either way, not a big savings if we pull it back, not a big cost escalation if we leave it in, pushed out to 27, but there was the proposal to bring it back into 26. So those were the potential changes that I heard, and if you have anything else, we can put them on the list for discussion.
Yeah, I would say on, Sarah, your initial comment and then talking to others, I think it's a good idea to try to get both these bonds cleaned up, so I think that makes sense. I also like the idea of waiting until we have the fire commission fully reconstituted, we have the fire administrator in place, all of that, and then we take a holistic view and try to answer the question, what's the best thing we can do for that valuable in-between group, right, of volunteers that we need, and let's have a study geared towards that across all three departments, and let's just wait on that. So that between those two is just a small difference. I like that. And finally, I think what was it? Oh, the treasury for $1 million makes sense. Keep in mind, we may still revisit that budget. Joan reserved the right, depending on circumstances and whether interest rates or other things continue to evolve, so she might adjust that further. But that's something that if we have to have an adjustment, that other boards, well, Board of Finance can pick that up, or the RTM. The only thing we have to worry about is that the RTM can only cut that budget. So if we get to that point, they couldn't raise it. And by raising the budget, it would imply decreasing the amount of investment income. So let's see how that goes, but I'm comfortable with what we have right there. And then
I'm going to interrupt you on that. We already did handle something like that 10 years ago. But we can't increase, but what we can do is adjust the mill rate, and that would generate as for the revenue, account for the revenue that you didn't have. And we did that when the governor cut out certain funding. I believe you were the chair. We decreased the mill rate by 2 basis points on a conversation that you, Jamie, and I had going in. So we could do it that way if necessary.
So that was actually an interesting maneuver. We did do that. It doesn't change the appropriation, though, that's relevant to all this. So
Okay.
we could. I'd rather not do that, but you're right. We could.
Yeah, we could do it if necessary. Okay.
The only other thing is that I like what Jennifer's got there, adjusting the health insurance to what's been committed to by United Healthcare to 8%. If we're able to do better with the Connecticut plan once we get the bids in, which are, when would you say?
Well, their final rate will be set in April, and we have a commitment to decide with UHC by
Right.
April.
Okay.
But what we are really waiting on is the disruption reports, so that we know what that would be before we start negotiations with the unions.
Okay. All right. I talked to a couple of people today who said unions are actually enthusiastic about the plan, so even with that disruption, it should actually be okay, but let's see. They need to make that decision. But by and large, I think this budget does a number of things right. One is that it maintains the level of service that I think our citizens expect. I think it makes a few investments where we need to make them. I think the fire administrator position, clearly adding into the deputy fire marshal ranks for their inspection needs, as well as the decision that we made a while back about facilities at the police department. All those things are expenses, but there are going to be savings associated with those, whether it's the fire side or on the police building maintenance side. I think that's good. Dan Baumgartner asked the right question yesterday about the change in the grand list as to whether the new properties would be generating enough tax revenue to cover these expenses. They certainly will. And so I think those are prudent investments. On the capital side, more to be debated about that, but I personally stand by every one of the things that we've added, the major projects being Pear Tree Point. That's part of the reason we have the tour out there, so that people could see the challenge that we have out there and what problems we're trying to solve. And then Wheat Beach, having sat there for quite some time, undeveloped, now's the time, I think, to turn it into a Wheat Beach extension. So those are my views. Comments?
I agree with what you've said. My only addendum, if you will, would be to to Weed Beach, and more specifically, and we mentioned this the other night, the aspect of that project that contemplates creating a walkway. I'm not convinced in any shape that it's legally required or actually necessary. I do believe that area has to be cleaned up, and I think that will be wonderful, but that's one carve out of that project, and if there's a way to eliminate that and have a cost reduction, I'd be very interested in pursuing that.
So Monica and I were just talking about that today. Actually, I'm okay with that. So one of the things that the tour reveals is, well, a couple things. First of all, if you go to Highland Farms and you get to Highland Farms, that's the only thing you can do. And so if you show up there, you would reasonably want to have a path, particularly if you're someone who requires a flat surface like that. I think that was, in retrospect, a good investment. If you go to Weed Beach, there's actually lots of paved surfaces at Weed Beach. There's sidewalks, there's a pavilion. Now the Parks and Rec team has ordered these mats that allow someone who's, say, in a wheelchair or has some wheels like a stroller or whatever, it allows them to get out there. So from an equity standpoint, the fact is there's lots to do at Weed Beach if you need a hard, flat surface. And the idea that somehow we have to make sure that the other side of the beach has to have that as well, I think is a much weaker argument. The fact is even in a wheelchair, you could go to Weed Beach with nice water views. It's fantastic, right? So I would actually be okay with taking that whole thing out, except what we ought to do is check with Parks and Rec. I thought the point that they made on the tour about boat access and being able to have something where the trailers could go down there, I think that's probably reasonable.
Yeah,
we ought to talk to them about that.
Yeah.
But the rest of that, around all that, that's actually a really small area, and maybe we can just do without that.
It's kind of a loop to nowhere.
Well, it is a loop, but.
Yeah, no, but like, it's very small. Highland Park is much
You'd be
more of
okay
a
with that.
walking
So,
path. This is,
I don't know that we need to change our appropriation, because remember what Jennifer said, that what we're not appropriating anything, actually. We're just signaling a capital budget that has what we think are not to exceed prices for each one of these things. And the idea is we want everybody to look at these not to exceed prices, not with an appropriation because we don't know quite when they'll be ready, but to say we've looked at it, we've debated it, we're okay with it. So for example, Weed Beach comes in at 1.7 million because we've taken out this path. We just have this little roadway to get out to the boats and we're done. We've all agreed that as long as it's not more than 2.5 million, we've all stacked hands and said, that's great, go ahead with it. So I think what we need to do is leave the placeholder amount. It's not an appropriation. We'll go back to the Parks and Rec Commission if we all agree and ask them in terms of a design change, would you please take this path out, but go think about what the right answer is for having some kind of road or path access for boat trailers to take kayaks down there. I think if we do that, that's an easy design change. You just don't put the path in there. I think that doesn't require any additional architecture, but allows them to make sure we've got the right access set up for kayaks. Reactions?
No, I definitely agree with that. And it's also the type of project that if we find down the line, after we've done an assessment of all the new projects that we have in town, certainly Pear Tree Point, certainly Great Island, that are useful for walking and biking, and we find, 5-6 years down the road, we do need a path. It's not that difficult to go back and add that at Weed Beach.
No, Sarah could come say we need to pave the entire thing. I mean, yeah,
Right.
I'd entertain it. No.
But yes, I was going to bring that up today as well, that I think that is just money that we don't really need to spend and we can utilize in other areas that might be more efficient.
Sarah, does that work? Just a trailer path and then take it all out?
yeah, I think that makes sense. I had two other things, and we can talk about this later if we were to meet to have a conversation with Parks and Rec, which I think would be lovely to have as far as sitting down, as far as design questions that we had. I don't know that I'm a huge fan of the fact that this permeable surface that they're planning on laying down is next to the sand and will become impermeable when the sand flows into it, particularly if the only piece of it that we have is the one that borders
I thought
the
I
beach.
heard him say that for the pathway, they were not going to be an impermeable surface.
You're
Right.
talking about the parking lot, I think, right?
But no, the path is permeable, is my understanding. It's like asphalt, but that sand could get into it and then it would become impermeable. So that was something that I heard. Now, I'm hoping that I'm wrong,
Well,
but would love
now
to
it
talk
might-
with them about.
It might be moved because if we're just going to put in that.
Right. 100%, and that was a question I had.
All right, we'll look at
I
that.
think, for me, I struggle with weed. Look, we need to clean up the parking lot. There are some things that we need to do, and I can totally appreciate that. And anything that we can do as far as helping coastal erosion issues, there is great. What I would like to see them do is to make an investment into adding more trees. And I would take some of the money that was appropriated towards a path and put some towards trees. A lot has been taken out in the past year and a half, and I think it would serve that area well, serve the neighbors well, and I think it would be a positive thing to add more trees there. It would certainly help with erosion issues.
Duly noted. I don't think that's unreasonable at all. I mean, you're right, they did take down trees in whatever, more than a year ago now, and we do want to address that.
Yes.
And the reality is there are parts of that area, particularly north up towards the
Correct.
Pump station, where you could just add even more trees, and it's not going to affect the recreation area that's part of this plan.
Correct.
And we should just take some of the pathway
And I
money
think it would
apply to
help
that. Yeah, I'll
the
buy
erosion
that.
issue.
Yeah,
in
native
general.
species, let's do it.
Great. Yeah, no trees in heaven.
Trees of it. Big tenant, sorry.
Joking for all those that are watching.
I would say on weed that I agree with Mike, but I do think that it might be prudent for us to at least get a bid that includes it and takes it out, because if it's $10, right? So I think having that information probably.
Like à la carte or less
Yeah,
pricing.
yeah.
Well, that would
Like
also
if
give
you
us,
did
that
this-
would give us a tree budget.
Well, and if they could, I mean, look, we've got to rebid it, so maybe they could do that
Do
that way
everything
and
with it.
break up, the
Yeah.
pieces.
Okay.
The only other thing I would say is on pear tree, that it is a really big number. I understand it's a placeholder, but I do hope that Park and Rec works very, very hard on looking for some additional funding from other sources
Okay.
to help cover the cost of that project.
Do you mean like donations or?
I mean, like the boat club or
Okay, got it.
or grants,
We'll
federal,
work on that.
state.
That's fair. Yeah.
They're doing a really good, they're really focused on the environment, and so I do feel like there could be some resources there.
And as we discussed before, I do think it's reasonable that we could divorce the boat club dredging from the parking lot and boat ramp project, so that the boat club dredging and the harbor dredging could be done concurrently or otherwise, just for efficiency's sake. It kind of depends on the harbor dredging in terms of permitting, but as Jennifer, you said yesterday, we're working on it, so.
The only other thing I would say is Jen did mention like workload and having.
Bandwidth issues, yeah.
Yeah, having all of these projects at the same time, and did you talk to her at all about that?
Well, we talked about it last night, but my further point on a couple of these things, one is dredging's kind of a singular and self-contained activity, and it's basically once the company gets there, they do their thing. For the Long Island Sound dredging, it's particularly easy because they're going to take the material and it's either going to be dewatered or they're going to dump it in Long Island Sound and kind of done.
Right.
There's nothing to oversee by park staff. For Tilly Pond and Cherry Lawn, it's a little more complicated because there's going to have to be some landscape remediation when the trucks come in and do all this work. They're going to have to clean that up, so that's going to take a little bit of work. But as far as I can tell, both those projects at the same time, you're going to have a third party coming in and do landscaping anyway, so I don't think it's going to be a lot of oversight. The one thing that will be a lot of oversight, even if we have building committees, is going to be Weed Beach, just because that's a big deal. And given the history, they're going to want to get that just right. I mean, there's lots of neighbors watching this. There's
Lots of parts to
there's lots of moving parts for that. So I think that's the big time sink. The others less so.
But getting those
Jennifer.
bids and putting a building plan together, it'll take some time, and we'll
All that. Yep.
hopefully do it right. And
Yep.
So we'll need two separate building committees,
Yes.
one for Weed Beach and one for Pear Tree?
yes,
I would say if they end up being perfectly concurrent, it's the same expertise for both.
Yeah.
We've got one building committee for 3 different
I know.
elementary schools,
I
so
was wondering.
maybe it's the same.
it's a lot.
So with the schools.
It's a time.
Yeah.
No, I'm just saying it's a lot for the chairs of the current building committee with 3 different schools.
Well, the only thing I'd
Just
say
want
is
to put that out there.
The only thing I would say is that these are much shorter projects, so they won't have the same duration, but I hear you. We also got to find enough people to do all of this.
100%.
And
It
you're
may be
already
easier
thinking-
to do one committee, and I can totally appreciate that.
And you're already thinking about your next building committee, so. Mike?
Just thinking back on the dredging, just because we haven't done it here in a considerable period of time, we may want to look into whether or not it's typical to have somebody from the town watching, that activity. When those bids come in, if there's some way to, like any big project, there's always an owner's rep there of some sort, and whether or not we would need someone from the town who's looking at and watching that dredging and knowing that they're going about it the right way. I don't know if that's typical, and maybe it's not, so never mind, but something to think about.
Yeah, given Craig Flaherty's involvement, particularly on the flooding side for Pear Tree Point, and he serves in that capacity for Great Island right now, and maybe someone or somebody from his firm could serve in that capacity for these two projects. I'm
Yeah, that
pretty
makes a
sure,
lot of sense.
partly because he knows that space really well, and they're super short projects relative to an HHR, so that would be my first stop on that.
Yeah.
Good thought. Other comments?
Not on Parks and Rec, but if you guys, I had something else I just wanted to ask. I didn't know if anyone else would want to. With the fire, I don't know the time frame that you want to be looking at for someone, a new fire kind of commission person. I think I would love to see if we can have a meeting, maybe sit down and talk about some of maybe the questions and look at things holistically. I know that it's difficult to, they're all volunteers, as you mentioned, and everyone's trying to do the right thing. I know it's hard because the 3 buildings are privately owned and there's some donation income and, we do pay for some costs. I would love to be able to kind of look at things holistically and going forward.
I'm sorry, the commission itself or the departments, or what do you, the whole fire?
Just everything.
All right, well.
Yeah, no, she knows, yeah.
So it's great that you bring that up. Part of what we want this newly reconstituted commission to focus on is exactly that.
Yeah.
Because right now, we don't have a kind of cross-cutting strategy that
Right.
works with all 3 departments. There's an equipment strategy that has equipment, say, for an individual department.
Right.
But when you look at it across all 3,
Right.
it makes sense. When you look at the volunteer strategy, it makes sense.
Right.
The uniforms that you buy, all that stuff, to have it all done kind of consistently across 3 departments, not overseen, I don't want to take away decision-making from
No,
departments, but for
work
certain
with.
things.
Not overseeing, but to be working with.
And so I think this is going to help a lot because we're going to be able to ask those questions explicitly.
Right.
And those commission members, or those commission meetings are going to be, well, like this one, where they're going to be on TV with regular minutes and meeting agendas and all that, so that people can listen in on those strategies and be part of that discussion. So
Yeah.
it's going to be a lot, I need some time to work it
Yeah.
with the commission, but in the coming months, we'll have that all built up. And frankly, by the time the fire administrator comes on, assuming we've got the budget for it July 1st, that should all be concurrent, the new commission
Yeah, that's great.
and the fire administrator about at the same
And
time.
I think everyone's working really hard. I think it's just a matter of getting everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
They just
With
need
a
that
deep
piece to
review.
help coordinate it.
Well, and also for the town to have a deep review and be able to, look at
Yeah, and
things.
somebody's already drafted a role description. I was working on it today. I need
Oh, that's
another
great.
couple of days. We'll work on the commission. It's going to come to this board to get
Yeah.
your reaction.
That's great.
And as well as the commission sort of mission and vision, if you will. So we'll do that collaboratively. I'd like you all to have input simply because this is fresh and new. We haven't done this before. So that's where we are on the budget in terms of changes. Putting on my old Board of Finance hat, it doesn't feel right in terms of not having massive changes in the budget. But Jennifer and I talked.
You mean arguments? Is that what you're saying?
Arguments, whining, I would whine about budgets a lot before, but Jennifer and I met about it earlier today, and the reality is it really is a testament to our department heads.
Mhm.
They came in with very high-quality budgets. They took direction from Jennifer early on in terms of what we were looking for, and just having sat through the meetings that Jennifer coordinated with the department heads and listened to their presentations, my hat is really off to them. They took that seriously. They made trade-offs, but they never kept, they always kept in mind the imperative that said, we've got a job to deliver quality service to our residents at the in the most efficient manner possible. And I think they did that. And I think the reason that you're seeing so few changes is because, I'd echo what Jennifer told me today. She says, I got nothing. I don't know what I would change. went through every line item and asked that Board of Finance question. We'll see what they say, but I just don't have any changes to make.
I'd like to thank you. You've had 2 hats on. And we really appreciate all that you've done. Thank you very much for making this very seamless and easy this year.
Yeah, Jen.
It's a lot of work.
Almost magical, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jen.
Yeah, this format was.
It worked well for you guys?
It worked
Yeah.
really well.
I do
Very
like
easy to
Open
read.
Up, I have to say. Oh, I can't stand it.
I think it's great for looking at it on your own and digging into it.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
nice thing, I miss being able to see like the work, like the proposal sheets and stuff, but you know
So-
what was really hard? Like, and everyone was logging in at the exact same time,
Exactly.
and then bandwidth wasn't,
Delay, yeah.
so that was not great,
It
right?
wasn't good for the budget
No.
review, but individually to go in there,
Right.
there's a lot of information.
Right,
Yeah, I met with OpenGov, and I told them what this problem was, and what I think you'd ideally like to have is an offline version, where it doesn't matter if you're logged in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
100%.
Just be an
Just see it,
offline
yep.
version.
because
then
it needs to
even
be like a
Jennifer-
database.
Exactly, and just a
Yeah.
read-only.
Yeah.
Because then even Jennifer could flip through this stuff fairly quickly.
100%.
But it added,
Because I like it. I like that you can see like years back and everything's there. I actually like it, but yeah.
but as well, this is a great idea, we'll get back to it. So more to come, but maybe by next year they'll develop that.
Yeah, because it's
that
hard,
capability.
yeah.
Marcy, comments, questions, you're good with this?
No, looks good.
Thank you, I appreciate
those
changes. Just, I
Mike,
think,
anything from your end?
think
Okay.
everybody did a great job.
All right, so where you're ending up for your budget, the Board of Selectmen budget, is a $1.75 million increase, which is 4.82%. The library is at a 3.37%, and debt service is 19.72, but as we talked about, that'll get refined. So the total town budget is 58 million, which is up 4.4, which is 8.2%. So I will just give you the,
Yeah, maybe we should have taken that number first, right? What number?
Just the
And
whole
work
percent.
backwards? Yeah, no, the working backwards thing I think is the wrong way to do it, sorry. So the net change for the entire town budget, you mean with the debt service and the library, we're up 11%?
Everything except Board of.
yeah, if you take all the expenses
Wow,
minus
okay.
all of the revenue.
Right,
But keep in mind, that's got the big debt service increase, which,
Yeah.
like I said, I'll talk about. I am on the RTM agenda, is that right, Jack, for that presentation?
Sort of.
Yeah, sort of.
I spoke to Seth, I spoke to several other members, and so we're meeting on Monday.
Oh, okay, this is.
So we'll see what we can get you on.
Well, it's debt
We may
service is really
stall you a little
Yeah.
bit so we can get done with some other business.
big increase.
No, that's
It's a big
completely
number.
fine, but
Yeah.
if I didn't have that, then I would just do a video presentation and it would be available.
I think it's better
Hey,
you doing it. in
Jen,
person.
do you have our total cap number?
Well, because I can
I
entertain
do,
questions
yeah,
on it.
yeah.
yeah.
and then, John, when you put that together, I would love if you could send it to us too. Ideally, I'd love to be able to make that RTM meeting when you present it.
All of you are going to get it in advance
Okay,
for comments, so.
great.
Yeah, so I'll make sure you.
But I think
have
it's
all your
helpful to
questions.
know, like, okay, here's where we'll be, you know, in 27 and 28, and,
This is a very different presentation, we've not done this before, but it's going to answer all these.
Yeah,
kinds of
no, I think it's
questions from our
helpful.
perspective.
Can you pass that down to John?
Just as an aside for members of the Board of Selectmen, because of school break, and then a professional development day on that Monday, which means kids are not going to school, which means some parents may not be home. The RTM meeting, which is typically on a Monday,
Mhm.
is on a Tuesday.
okay.
I even had to double check the reason why, because I'm going, why? But it's on a Tuesday.
We have our meeting on that
February
Monday, though.
25th?
Monday.
No, you have a
We're
Monday.
Monday the
meeting.
24th.
Right, we're
Yeah.
we're that night, yeah, yeah.
It's right after break, so it's fine.
Right, well, we don't, we have no break anymore. Well, you do, sorry.
So total capital, we're 4,883,600 for general capital, and 16 million for bonding puts us at 20,883,600 for
And
total.
the bonding for the bonded CapEx is not part of this resolution.
Right, so what you have on there is only the 4,883,000. That's all that you
The
would be
non-bonding.
approving as a budget for this, this time. But you are approving the 6-year plan that includes the bonding.
Okay. You'll get us those numbers? the spreadsheet.
So I've got these, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this resolution, somebody will need to move it,
Yeah,
second it,
yeah.
and then we'll vote it, and then I think that's it, correct?
Yep.
All
Can you
right.
send us a copy when it's all, yeah?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Are you also going to do the vote on the 5-year capital?
The wording is actually part of the
In that
resolution.
part?
Yep.
Okay.
Resolution, fiscal year 2025-2026 budget. Whereas the Board of Selectmen have reviewed and evaluated the town administrator's proposed budget for fiscal year 2025-2026 and the 6-year capital plan, and whereas, following completion of this review, a number of changes and modifications have been made to the budget, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Selectmen hereby approve the modified annual budget for 2025-2026 and the 6-year capital plan. Be it further resolved that the 2025-2026 budget and 6-year capital plan be submitted to the Board of Finance for their consideration. General Fund. General Operating Fund, $42,805,447. Debt Service, $15,097,346. Transfers out to other funds, $76,712, for a total general fund of $57,979,505. Other funds, Sewer Operating Fund, $4,688,907. Parking Operating Fund, $943,839. Great Island Management Fund, $340,853. Recreation Programs Fund, $1,685,000. Capital Fund, $4,883,600. Sewer Capital Fund, $119,360. And Parking Capital Fund, $50,000. Do I have a motion for that resolution? Mike moves, Monica seconds, all in favor? Unanimous, thank you. I think we're all set. Jennifer, is there anything else for the good of the order?
There is not.
Okay. I appreciate everyone's involvement in this process. As always, you did your homework, you looked through the materials, you had good questions, and it's, I think, a testament to your dedication to this board and the town, and I really appreciate it. Again, Jennifer, thank you, miracle worker that you're wearing. I think it's 12 hats, but I'll take 2. And thank you to all of you for participating. Jack, I appreciate you guys coming in and offering your thoughts on all this. And thank you to everybody for listening, but I think we're done. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
Well, and thank you as well.
Yeah.
You were the leader in this effort.
No charge.
Wait a minute.
No extra.
No way.
To this day,
Part of the general
nobody-
service.
Nobody reads that resolution as quickly and as fine as you do, regardless of how hard Jim and I try.
No problem. All right. Motion to adjourn, I think was Mike. Monica seconds. All in favor? We're adjourned. Thanks, friends.
Thanks.